Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, March 9th, 2022 Watertown Plan Commission meeting. Can I get a roll call?
Yes. Dolly.
Here.
Ford.
Here.
Kays.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
Oletsky.
Present.
Dargis Johnson.
Here.
Colhane.
Here.
And Spire is here, but he will not be acting on any items. And Brink is absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Brandy. Moving on to item 3 on the agenda is the invitation for public comments, participants submittal. I believe there's a sign up there in the room. If you'd like to speak on an item that's not on today's agenda, we'll have a time for that at the end of the agenda. Item 4 on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion for approval?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second, Colhane.
A motion by Dargis and a second by Colhane. Any additional discussion on this agenda? Take a vote.
All right. Colhane.
Yes.
Dargis Johnson.
Yes.
Oletsky.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes. The agenda is approved. We'll move on to item 5. 5A on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the February 10th, 2022 meeting. I'll need a motion from the board.
So moved, Colhane.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any additional discussions on those minutes? All right, we'll take a vote on those.
All right. Dolly.
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Oletsky.
Yes.
Dargis Johnson.
Yes.
Colhane.
Yes.
Those minutes are approved. Thank you. We'll move on to item 6 on the agenda is the regular agenda. Item 6A is commission consideration of resolution number 2022-08, amending the zoning district for Watertown, Prairie Haven Edition. Brandy, if you want to take us through that.
Yes, thank you, Blake. So this is the Prairie Haven Edition. You can see here on the map that I have pulled up that it's located to the west of Golf Course Road and south of 3rd Avenue Northwest, which is south of the Derby Downs development over by the airport. So this property they're looking at platting it as they're going to rezone it to R1C because it was brought in, when it was annexed in the zone, it was brought in as A1 agricultural district. And there is 34.07 acres. So then it's within the Sioux Rural Water territory. So we're looking at platting it as the one lot, and then they will look to further subdivide and conform to the concept plan. The concept plan was approved by the Plan Commission on September 23rd of 2021, and the area was annexed and zoned on September 7th of 2021. So this, you'll be seeing this development again in the future as it's subdivided to conform. The concept plan did show that it would be zoned R1C. Sorry, I haven't stated that yet. So they're looking to rezone this to R1C, which is the compact single-family residential district. And that does conform to what they show in their concept plan. And you can see on this map what that layout looked like when it was approved last year. And so this is the rezone, and then there will be a replat, an administrative replat with this. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Brandy. I'll open the public hearing on this item if anybody's here to speak on behalf or against. It looks like, as you mentioned, Brandy, this is perfectly in line with what we've seen and discussed on this property in the past with the concept of preliminary plan. As you stated, the intention was to have this zoned R1C, and that's the scope of what we're looking at today.
Yep.
Anybody there in the room or online that would like to speak on behalf or against this issue, please approach the microphone.
I just had a quick question for the applicants. Bill or Steve, are you guys looking at now trying to access any of those new state funds that were just approved at the legislature this week for infrastructure?
I'm Bill Riefenberger with High Five Properties. in the future, this one, we've got the TIF approved for the
Right.
first phase. In the future, we're certainly gonna look at that. That was kinda up and down until apparently
Just
today,
a couple
so.
days ago, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously, we're gonna see where that goes, and we're looking at, I'm assuming, to come back in about 2 years with the next project. Okay?
Yep, thank you.
Brandy, can you refresh my memory where the park is for this one?
Yes, so they will have, well, and that's actually, they're going to pay for this phase. I'm trying to refresh my memory too. They're going to pay for this phase. So this went to the park board when we brought it forward for the concept plan. And so they have the park area pegged for this area. So just looking at the entire quarter section, you know, say that they only end up with phase one, we feel the Derby Downs Park is within close enough proximity where if this never did fully develop, they would still have a park within the quarter-mile vicinity. And so then they will pay the cash in lieu for this phase when we get to the platting phase.
Is that gonna reduce the overall park requirement then by the, whatever the proportion of this represents?
Yes.
Okay.
So the park will be on the corner of Golf Course Road and Third Avenue, kind of where the path goes?
Yep. So they're looking at dedicating this area, and it will be probably a smaller area just because for the park department, you know, taking on additional land can be tough for maintenance. So we'll get down to the finer details as this development progresses, but this area is pegged for it. And then it is a nice location. The park board felt that too, with the trail being there and the excess right-of-way in that area, so.
All right, thank you. If there's anybody else to speak in the public hearing, we do have that open. If there's none, I'll close the public hearing on this item. We'll
Brandy,
need a
can
motion
you-
by the board in order to proceed.
Sorry. I'll make the motion to approve, just to move forward.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
that. I'll second that, please.
Thank you, Bonnie. Additional discussion on this item before we take a vote?
Yeah, just one question for Brandy. What are the setbacks on that, Brandy?
The R1C,
Yeah.
25 front and rear, and then 6 foot and 9 feet for the side yards. The idea behind that is 6 foot is okay for fire code for separation, but then we didn't want to do 6 foot on both sides because then people have issues getting a vehicle into their rear yard because there isn't any alley access. That works for, you know, the older part of town where there are typically alleys where in our R2A areas. So there's 6 foot side yard setbacks for lots that are less than 75 feet in the R2A district. But the R1C, we did keep it 6 and 9 for side yards.
And they can put it on either side of the house, right?
Yep, they can either side that they choose. They just have to have one of each.
I don't know if I can speak it. I presume it's gonna be on the garage side, so if somebody had a camper situation or something, that was our intention at this point.
Yep, and that does make the most sense because then you can have also an additional slab for parking.
Any other questions or comments from the board? All right, we'll proceed with a roll call vote.
Okay, Dolly,
Yes?
Ford,
Yes.
Kays,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Aletsky,
Yes.
Jargis Johnson,
Yes.
Colhane.
Yes.
All right, we have 7 in favor. That motion carries. Moving on to item 6B on the agenda is consideration of resolution number 2022-09, annexation of attractive land for R&R First Edition. Brandy?
Yes, thank you, Blake. And actually, this is an annexation and zoning, so I'm going to present the facts once, and then we'll take two separate actions, obviously on the two separate resolutions for the annexation and zoning. If you're comfortable with that, Blake?
I'm comfortable with that. I plan to do one public hearing for both items. We'll take the actions independently, but we'll do the public hearing together.
Perfect. And technically, we only need one for the zoning aspect, but that's where we can talk about both.
Thank you.
So, this property here is located north of Highway 212, situated between Big Shots Fireworks and Lou's Fireworks. For some context, this is currently surrounded by city limits. This property here in the blue that's highlighted, the owners are R&R Holdings LLC, and they're looking to annex and zone this property as I-1 light industrial, which you can see there is I-1 zoning to the north and to the southwest, and some C3 to the west, and then I-2 to the east. They are looking at coming forward, doing some land swapping, and so you will see this property again for some rezones. This is also within the Suro water territory for water service, so they will take care of that and then come back forward just to give you some foresight of that you'll be seeing this again. But as of today, we're just annexing and zoning the 4 acres as I-1. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Case.
the rezoning would be consistent with the current land use plan that we have on file?
Yes.
All right, I'll open the public hearing if there's anybody here to speak on behalf or against.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Case.
a question for Don Roby. So Don, you guys are looking at acquiring this property and then developing it as a whole, or melding it into some of the other things that you're doing out there already?
Hi, Don Roby, representing R&R Holdings as well as Glacial Lakes Rubber and Plastics. To the north of that land, you'll see is 700 Pheasant Ridge Drive. That is Glacial Lakes Rubber and Plastics. The original building, the southern part, is the addition we put on 2 years ago. We, just in strategic planning, we're planning ahead. We need some more room. That's why we bought the property. We'll likely bring further expansion that way, and we've got some other ideas. Maybe we can do some things with the neighbors and reconfiguring. But the idea is just we're buying space for future expansion.
Thank you.
And even if those future projects don't happen, this would be conforming, this property in and of itself.
If the minimum lot area for I-1 is 1 acre?
30,000 square feet.
Okay.
So just under, or a little under. And so this is 4 acres.
And it looks like the vicinity plan, as far as easements go, there's nothing abnormal. Standard utility access easements here.
What
Yep.
about access?
How they're planning on developing it now, they would not need additional access to Highway 212 because they are adjacent.
So there's no plans on using the existing access points
And
there?
I don't believe that there is actually access. I know there
I
was
mean,
some easements when this property was in the county.
There was a residential easement when they had a prior residence. It was a mobile home there. That went away once the mobile home was moved. So we know that access is gone, or that easement is gone.
I guess I was looking down the road, if in the agreements of doing some things with your neighbors, of using existing Big Shots access or something was being considered down the road. Because there, I'm just wondering if, DOT would need to be made aware of something along
Yeah,
those
the
lines.
DOT is not going to give you access to 212. I'm sure they won't. So we're aware of that, and there's some ideas we have in the works, but we're not planning on putting in access to 212.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same sheet of music.
Any further questions for the applicant from the board?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
To Commissioner Kay's question, maybe to provide a little more clarity here, I believe what Commissioner Kay's is getting at is not wanting a landlocked parcel without access availability. I'm just curious, Brandy or Don, Mr. Roby, if there's any intent to re-subdivide this parcel with the parent parcel, is that an expectation or not necessarily at this point?
The adjacent piece for sure will stay with Glacier Lakes Rubber and Plastics. There has been an idea or two talked about doing some land trading. We'll swap out that frontage piece on 212 and then maybe pick up a piece up closer to Glacier Lakes.
And if this property were, because that's a good point to bring up, Heath, and that will actually be more so, the next action will be on the plat. But then if they wanted to get a building permit for this property, or even with platting it, we shouldn't plat landlocked properties. So we would look at wanting to see some sort of access agreement prior to building permit issuance.
That's just where I was going at the south end of that property. If we just want to make sure, you're right, it's probably premature to be talking, this is annexation and zoning, but that's just something that we need to be cognizant about moving forward.
All right, thank you, Mr. Roby.
Thank you.
Thank you to the board.
Appreciate it.
Public hearing is still open if there's anybody else here to speak. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We have two actions in front of us for the board. I think we need to take action first on the annexation prior to the zoning.
Mr. Chair, Kay's motion on 2022-09, the annexation resolution.
Second, Culhane.
A motion and a second. Any additional discussion before we take a vote? All right, roll call vote, please.
All right, Culhane,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Aletsky,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Kays,
Yes.
Ford,
yes,
Dolly.
Yes. 7 yes, 0 no. That resolution passes. Moving on, we've got action in front of us, Resolution 2022-10, which is the zoning portion.
Chair, I'd make a motion to approve resolution number 22-10, the zoning portion. Culhane.
I'll second
Motion by
that,
Culhane.
Aletsky.
Second by Oletsky. Any additional discussion? All right, roll call vote, please.
All right, Dolly,
Yes.
Ford,
yes,
Kays,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Aletsky.
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Culhane.
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no. That resolution passes as well. Moving on to item 6C on the agendas, 2022-11. This is a plat for R&R First Edition.
Yes, thank you, Blake, and I'll pull that up so you can see. And obviously, this is the plat for the area that is being petitioned for annexation and zoning that was just acted on. It'll be zoned I-1, it's 4 acres. The minimum lot requirement is 30,000 square feet for the I-1 district. And typically, you know, this could be just attached as an exhibit and then administratively approved because there aren't any infrastructure improvements. However, it's before you today for action, just because to make aware that there is a trunk sewer assessment fee that will be collected prior to recording this plat for the sanitary sewer trunk line within within the Highway 212 right-of-way. And so that will be at the price of $1,456. And then they also will work with Watertown Municipal Utilities on the sewer water consent decree for WMU serving the utilities for this area now with it being annexed and zoned. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Brandy.
And again, because this is the recommendation of this parcel, considering it part of the parent parcel, so we don't have to worry about access.
Right, and it does have the frontage, and so if that would be something that if this never, if this was a property owner that didn't own to adjacent properties, that would be something that they would need to work out their access and have an easement prior to platting. This one, it's the situation more so of just getting it annexed and zoned and then working to re-subdivide it, so it's just the one lot right now.
So we can call it a transitory plat, transition plat, is that kind of what we're thinking? Because it's not being attached to any, it's not being attached to any parent parcel, and there is no direct access to any street coming off of this plat. Correct?
That's correct, Commissioner Kays. Yeah, and I'd leave it to the board's consideration, but because it is a contiguous owner, that definitely weighs into this discussion. If this were a separate owner, I can tell you that we would at minimum be requiring approval of an access onto Highway 212 or an approval of an easement through one of the adjacent parcels. Otherwise, this parcel ends up landlocked without access to it.
And I get that, and I'm not trying to be difficult, I just want to make sure that we're being consistent in how we handle these, either through a developer's lot agreement or an agreement on access to that property as a condition of the plat. If that's what we've done with if we haven't done that in the past, I'm fine not doing that. I just want to make sure we're consistent in how we apply that.
Yes, and I agree. I think it's good to look at it just as the parcel itself and not taking into consideration the adjacent properties. However, they do, for the plat, for the highway authority, they would sign off as saying that they are not approving access, but that they would need to get a access permit. So the plat, I mean, those are all details that they would have to get worked out for us to be able to issue a permit. So
Isn't it a statutory requirement that you have to have access as a signatory on the block of the plat? And if we can't assign access to it, I just want to make sure we're consistent.
Yes, you're exactly right. That's a conflict at hand here, at least through city ordinance, if not also through state statutes. So again, I don't know, Brandy, if we have any recent examples of, because the property owner is the same as the adjacent property to the north, if we have examples where we've dealt with that situation or not.
I guess I'm okay if we make a motion moving it forward, is that by the time it gets to the city council, you have a solution with that, if staff believes there's one necessary. I guess that's just where I'm at.
And so, and this is actually the certificate that I have pulled up is not their standard language. So what DOT signs off on is that they're not granting access by signing the plat. They're saying they would need to get an access permit. The city highway authority would say that where the access would be coming from, and that would be granted at the time of building permit issuance. In this situation with the highway authority, I think we could. It just kind of puts this one's a tough situation, and hopefully won't happen that often because it is in the county right now. To bring it in, and then with the sewer water issue is really where we're running into this, right. Where I guess we could have a DLA go to council that would momentarily tie this property to the property to the north, where the adjacent landowner owns. And I appreciate you bringing that up because I do think that looking at it consistently, this one's just
it's different.
difficult.
I understand it is different, but there, the property that comes onto Mr. Alama's Big Shots, that's all that access is on his property right now, right? It abuts, but it's not. He doesn't have to provide access to R&R on that property.
Well, and that, in the case, I don't know. It's too bad Jeff isn't here,
I remember
actually.
that because when they developed that in the county, that access was there to that, and that's why there was an alternate access off of Mr. Alama's property to the farm. And so there is no access to that property, the Highway 81, unless Mr. Alama was to grant access to that existing point.
Now you have me thinking that there is actually an access easement that's like a frontage road.
And that's why I just didn't know if when Mr. Alama brought his in, did you guys do something with that? If that is, then my concerns go away.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing these up, and I apologize for not having those answers off the cuff here.
I'm just surprised.
I don't know what he brought that in as. It's great that this legal description is so long. It's not going to tell me that. Give me 1 minute here.
Brandy, I just thought of a question either for you or Mr. Roby. Is the timing of this particular plat essential to keep this moving, or can this be postponed long enough to bring it forward with, on the heels of it, the subdivision plat that would tie it to the north parcel?
Actually, just to butt in there, time-wise, it wouldn't hold anything up. So the plat would actually time up because the zoning needs 2 hearings at council. So we could hear this plat at the March 24th Plan Commission meeting, and then it would be able to time up with the annexation and zoning. And we could get those details ironed out on if there is that access easement in the front.
And I guess if the chair would be so inclined, I would make a motion just to proceed with a recommendation to approve subject to staff working out the access issue prior to city council meeting. If that would be.
I have no issue with that.
Not to belabor the point, but to keep things moving for Mr. Roby.
Second.
I guess that was a motion and a second, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion from the board? We'll take a vote on that.
All right, Colhane.
Yes.
Dargis Johnson.
Yes.
Oletzky.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes. 7 yes, 0 no. Resolution passes.
Out those details and before council.
We'll move on to item 6D on the agenda, resolution number 2022-05. It's a plat for CAC's 4th edition.
All right, thank you, Blake. Let me get over to the west side of town now. So the before you is the plat of CAC's 4th edition, and this is basically phase 2 of CAC's Lakeside Edition, which is north of Lake Pelican and is situated between what it has been so far developed in CAC's Edition with the various residential zoning designations on the east side, and then it extends all the way over to 42nd Street Southwest, which is currently a township road. And so this entire area, which I believe is 112 acres, will be platted with CAC's 4th. It will include 30 conforming R1 single-family residential lots in these areas that I'm pointing out here. You can see they meet the minimum, and they're larger than the minimum square footage requirement for an R1 lot, which is 9,000 square feet. These, I believe, are around 11,000. So then these areas will abut an urban street section. And then if you recall, we approved the updated concept plan for the CAC's Phase 2, and that was on October. Okay, hold on here. That was on September 9th, and that we also acted on or recommended approval to council for their PUD plan and rezone. So the rezone included the R1 areas as well as the PUD, the planned unit development. And that is what the concept plan showed as well. The PUD is for a rural residential setting. And so then we also allowed for the extension of 17th Avenue Southwest and 18th Avenue Southwest, where it extends beyond the urban densities that are zoned R1. We allowed that to be a rural residential street section, and that is also per our engineering design standards because these lots are greater than 2 acres, and that is where we can allow for that type of street section. So that was all approved with the concept plan. And then, so now we're moving forward. And Bonnie, did you have a question?
Okay, yeah, when you say rural, so everyone's going to have their own septic system and be connected to rural water, or are they going to have all city utilities?
They will have all city services. So
Perfect, because the existing ones to the west, those are out in the county, right?
Yep.
And they don't have city water. They have rural water and
yep.
septic. Okay, thanks.
And that is the great benefit of this property. And this was annexed and zoned, and it was brought in, it was brought in years ago with phase 1. And so then we did the rezone we accepted the PUD plan and then rezoned the urban density areas to the R1. And so then they have, the sanitary sewer and water will be extended through all of the new right-of-ways over to 42nd. And so they will have city services. Some other things to point out with this plat. So also attached with this, with the plat is the development agreement for informational purposes. Plan Commission you don't act on that. It's just so that you guys can see what the arrangements are for the infrastructure improvements. And then that will go to council for authorization for the city manager to enter into. And some things to point out just that are different about this plat that are included in the development agreement is that 42nd Street Southwest, that's a township road. And when it's been half of the street section that is adjacent to this subdivision has already been annexed and zoned within city limits. So the arrangement that we worked out is that because we're not going to improve that to an urban street section at this time, the developer will pay what that half street cost would be when it's improved to city standards in the future. The reason for doing that up front is because otherwise a formal assessment project would most likely take place if 42nd is ever improved, which would put a lot of cost burden on these 2 residential lots when the benefit is truly for the entire subdivision, because that was actually 42nd had to extend 17th had to extend all the way over to 42nd for secondary fire access before any more development was done, because right now we only have access on 33rd. So for the amount of development that is in this area, we needed that secondary access. So that is one thing to point out. Second thing would be the park dedication. That was approved by the park board on February 23rd of 2021. And so with the CAX Phase 1, they have the bike trail easement. Then they will also extend that within Phase 2. It'll run where I have my cursor, if you can see, along the south side of 18th Avenue and then the south side of 17th Avenue. So that equals...
This is the hatched area on the plat map?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
And so all of that easement area will be, thank you for, I'll show you guys on there if I can make it back to the main page here. If you give me a moment. Okay.
So the trail's gonna run along that 18th?
Yep, and I'll point that out here. So you can't, it doesn't show it. It shows it's such a big development that it's split up and with the amount of details. So you can see, I'll just point it out with my cursor here. It's going to run along the south side of 18th Avenue and then the south side of 17th Avenue. And then eventually it will connect to 42nd and go north where the recreational trail master plan is shown. So that equals 2.12 acres. It's 20 feet in width. The developer will be expected to grade that bike trail within 0.2 feet of the finished elevation for this area because they will have the rural street section. So they have an easement for the drainage and then the bike trail. So it will not be inundated where the drainage is running. And it will be in place so that in the future when Park and Rec is able to install the asphalt mat, that there's not grading work that needs to be done as well. And then, so that is 2.12 acres of the full easement area, and developers per Title 14 are required to give 5% of the area being master planned or annexed, which in total comes to 5.61 acres. So the developer will pay the difference for cash in lieu, which comes to $4,753.38 to the Park and Rec Department for making up that difference. So they're taking a combination. Park Board was comfortable with taking the combination of the trail easement and the cash in lieu. And the cash in lieu amount comes from the assessed value of the property.
And
per acre.
also, how close is it to that park and that subdivision north of there? Isn't that the park where they're talking about for that area to go to?
Yes, so that is within that quarter section. And Park Board did look at all of those possibilities, and they felt in this area, because these lots are so large, that having the recreational trail was more beneficial in this area. So, and then it is within proximity to that public park as well. Another thing to point out, and I can take additional questions on any of these things that I'm stating, I'll just finish my presentation and then open it up for questions. No. So then we have been in contact with the township, and, the potential maintenance issues that construction activities could cause if contractors were to be using 42nd Street Southwest. So we have worked with, city entities and the developer and the township, and have created a street access, a construction access road agreement. And that will be prohibiting contractors from using 42nd and having them use the city street systems so that the larger equipment isn't causing extensive damage to the township road, and keeping it in the condition that it is today. And
That's for empty trucks as well as heavy trucks?
Yep.
And what happens when one of those trucks drive on 42nd Street and Mr. Muller gets a phone call?
And that will kind of be, under the patrol of.
I mean, what's the consequence? I guess that's my question. Is that something that's fined? What happens to somebody that's driving a truck on that road that's not supposed to be? I mean, that's a real question. We can all agree that it's not going to happen, but we both all know that it's going to happen at some point in time.
I mean, I would imagine the township will put up signs that say.
The townships don't have fining authority though for those types of things. So I guess what kind of assurance are we providing that the township? Is it some sort of a fine that can be established by the city on those trucks? I'm not picking on Steve. It's just that we deal with these types of agreements when the county does wind tower projects, when they do CAFO constructions, and the teeth there is that you don't get to do you you don't get to do your project, or you can put a halt on the project, and we don't want to do that. But the reality of the question is, what happens when somebody does?
And to that point, Commissioner Kays, Matt's not here this evening, but maybe more of a legal question for him. I don't know as though the city police would have jurisdiction on that road either. Maybe it's something that the township, the developer, and the county, the sheriff's office would have to have some level of agreement on as far as the ticketing authority for anybody doing
I don't know,
damage.
they're not breaking any law by driving it from a county perspective. And that the issue is if this was a city street that we were applying this Hall Road agreement on, I think the city would have much more teeth in what they can and cannot do to the applicant. But when we're involving another third-party township, and I'm guessing that you've had this conversation with them, do they understand that there might not be a lot of teeth in this agreement?
And so I used a draft of the County Hall Road agreement, but we can work with Matt on adding some teeth to this. And I think too, ultimately we will enter the development agreement for 2 years. So, and this is tied to the development, so I think that there could be repercussion there, but.
Yeah, and I would emphasize too, we as a city are helping facilitate here, but are not party to this agreement. It is a township road that the developer's activity is going to potentially compromise. And so we're kind of acting as a third party to facilitate agreements between the township and the developer so that we as a city can confidently move forward with the approvals of the development.
Does the township have to sign on to the access to 18th or 17th? Because it's their right of way, unless you know what I'm saying?
No, because we have that half of the right of way.
Only up to a certain point.
Well, because when we annex and zone, it goes to the half
Right,
of the
there's
section
lanes
line or
There's 2
quarter
lanes
line.
of traffic on that road. This gets to the point to a bigger issue where I think we as a city have need to be looking at policies where we're taking the whole piece of the road, not half roads, because it ends up becoming problematic when we're dealing with other governmental units. And I think we're sorely inadequate in how we approach development. So my recommendation is that we would we would annex all the way across, so the whole thing comes into play.
That has been our current practice. This was annexed, I want to say, in early 2000s.
Can't we take the other part of it right now?
We'd have to annex and zone that. And this is something that all communities deal with when the city limits are abutting the county and the infrastructure. And so that's where we were in touch with John West, the township supervisor, and he felt comfortable with this agreement.
Yeah, okay.
So we can continue to work with Matt on strengthening this so that those are valid concerns of, having some teeth to an agreement.
Did the township have any concerns with traffic going to the north once the development is at full build out and property to the north still might not be in city limits, and what that's going to do to the long-term condition of that road?
And through discussion, lots of discussion, the city feels that the vehicular traffic that will be generated from this development won't have
Detrimental
impact.
effects?
No. And then that can be something that, if there's future, if things come to fruition in the future, can be an open discussion.
Well, it's just, it's a paved street, I get that. We'd be having a different conversation if this was a gravel road that was accessing it,
Well,
because the township would have a different position, I'm guessing.
and it's a 2-inch bladder top.
Right.
So, but that's where, really the bulk of, and I can actually let Heath speak to this more so, of the equipment that will be utilizing it, for the ag land adjacent there is probably going to have more of a negative impact than the, city vehicular, daily residential travel
Well, the
patterns.
trip count is, I mean, 15 years from now when the thing is completely built out, there's gonna be more trips on that road going forward, and whether or not a 2-inch blotter is gonna sustain the extra 700 trips a day that's gonna be on that road than there is today. And that's just a question from a long-range planning, and hopefully, you know, the township is aware that that's gonna have, you know, an advanced degradation to that road moving forward. And again, just trying to look at long-range relationships as well.
Yeah, this discussion really is part of a larger one when it comes to shared roads on the outskirts of the community. You've got a lot of shared roads between the county, the townships, the state, and one thing we don't have here in Watertown that has been on my list is, with my city engineer hat, is a shared roads agreement with all those agencies, where you sit down with each one of them and you figure out what makes sense for those agencies and for the community on who's maintaining what, who's responsible for what. We run into this discussion on the north end of town as things continue to grow north. We've had these discussions on some portions of the south end of town, west side of town, east side of town, in all directions. As we grow, traffic increases, and townships are left wondering, you know, where the responsibility should lie. Rightfully so. You know, they've got a township road that used to have minimal traffic. In this circumstance, and one of the points Brandy was trying to make there is, you know, when you look at any road, it's the truck traffic that generally degrades the road at an exponential rate. This road's a little bit unique because it is just a blotter seal on the road. It's not a formal 4-inch asphalt mat of pavement. So yes, some additional vehicular, some car and pickup traffic could degrade this road further, but generally speaking, your other streets are more impacted by truck traffic. Your garbage trucks, your semis, your tractor trailers, things like that. Those are what really degrade the road all the quicker. In this situation, you know, there's a lot of road there, a lot of 42nd Avenue before you get up to Highway 212 that's not adjacent to any city limits. So that's another point of contention where the city really doesn't want to take the entire section of 42nd from the lake all the way up to Highway 212 when we've only got this little stretch of annexed area that's adjacent to it. So we definitely want to keep that in mind too as we weigh out these discussions. But I think the points made this evening would be, you know, with the township's level of satisfaction in any kind of agreement that would be executed, how enforceable it is. I think the enforcement aspect is probably the biggest component I'd pull out of this discussion.
And I'm completely supportive of Steve's project, and not trying to put a damper on it. I think I'm just trying to address the bigger issue of how do we address transportation development on the periphery of the community as the community continues to grow. And I just think we need to be thinking about, as you said, trying to come up with what those agreements, having them in place ahead of time would make things, decision-making a lot easier. That's all.
What would be the next steps on putting some agreement in place, Heath?
Well, I think just starting those discussions with those other agencies, seeing what their level of interest is, and then, you know, coming together and trying to find some common ground, I think is going to be the biggest hurdle or biggest accomplishment we'd have to try to work through is, you know, what is fair and appropriate for all these roads that are adjacent to city limits and on the edge of the city limits. So really it's just starting the conversations and seeing where they lead.
And we had this discussion. It's something that communities throughout South Dakota deal with. We had this at the planners conference specifically on this topic, and nobody has the answer. And I think it's just being open to wanting to maintain good relationships with all of the adjacent entities with the county and townships, and wanting to keep progressing with those discussions, and hopefully create some consistency where then we have the answer for the different scenarios, but they always are unique.
So if I were bringing in a development, I have to bring in the street to get me there, right?
Well, so they needed that street access for
Well, here's my
the
point.
fire, but they do
I'm
have
talking the old street that UPS sits on. I can't see it from here. What street is that? Yeah, that one.
Yep.
What number is that?
33rd Street.
Okay, that's not improved to a city standard street, am I correct? Isn't that narrow?
It is so that was annexed and zoned, and it was not improved necessarily. I don't know if it's to a city standard, but that's what I was gonna say, is that all of these lots do have access, though, to within city limits through the city street system.
Right, but that city street to me is not improved to where it should be for that amount of development. Now, that's my point. If I were bringing in a development without, do I not have to have the street improved to get my people there? That's my concern. I guess I think I brought this up when we annexed it in the first time, that, we have a lot of homes there with the trailer court, or I think part of that's trailer court anyway. And now we're gonna add, 33 more homes, which, again, I love the development, it's not that. My point is safety of people on that road. As we get younger drivers out there, that street is very narrow. It's just very narrow. And you're gonna add a lot more traffic to it. So I feel that, either the developer or the city or somebody needs to take responsibility to widen that First Street. I'm not concerned about the one on the edge. Like I said, we're kind of, whose street is it over at the west end? But this street here should be wide enough to accommodate the heavy trucks that need to come in for construction, for garbage trucks, for everything else, school buses that are gonna now be out there more so.
Yeah, that'd be one of those, it appears, at least from Brandy's map that she's got pulled up, that is what I'd call another joint jurisdictional roadway that, I'm assuming we're plowing that, city forces are maintaining that, but it's technically half in, half out of the city.
Is that on our collector,
It is, actually, this one, 38th is actually the minor collector, which is the street segment in this phase and to the west. And that will be designed as an urban street section. So this GIS is a little glitchy.
But my point is, I don't think the county's gonna argue if we said, hey, we're gonna improve this street and we're taking on the expense of it. I don't think the county's gonna balk and say, oh, no, we're not gonna give up our jurisdiction on that road.
No, I think you're accurate there. I'm not sure the city's in a position to say that, though.
That's where I'm going with the developer.
Yeah,
That's my point.
yeah.
If I'm gonna bring in homes to a city, I should have to develop the street to get my people there.
That's also not adjacent to the development in question, right? This is from a prior development.
True.
And that's where with orderly development, we always see that, so for this phase, this 38th in this location will be the minor collector someday. But it obviously needs this section to develop. But that's where, for reference, with River Ridge, they are required to build that out with each phase, their half street section though, because the other portion is still in the county. And that's where really when this development was done, it should have been improved so that we would have orderly development as it goes down the line.
We can't blame blame Steve
No.
for the things that we missed previously as a city.
So if I could describe what I would see happening with 33rd, at least from a right-of-way management standpoint, from the city's perspective, if or when at some point the city decided that 33rd should be built to an urban street section with curb and gutter and appropriate, adequate width, and adequate pavement thickness and all those things that we put into our roads, what I would see happening is, one of the first things we would do is we would reference the old development agreements and see what, if any, obligations we put on those developments that are in the city, and likely run some kind of an assessment project where we'd rebuild that road and assess the cost back to the adjacent properties. The property to the east is easy enough because it's county property, and at point of annexation, that assessment would be their responsibility to help pay for. The properties on the west are all now individual residential lots, so that becomes a little more complicated, and why I say we would reference whatever kind of development agreements may have been in place, or whatever kind of commitments. Maybe we collected some kind of money from those developers from years past. I have no idea without looking, but those are the things we would want to check off before pursuing an assessment project. But the assessment process is likely what we would go through, long story short, to build 33rd out.
What would be the triggering criteria for the city to say we do need to improve this road?
You know, some of the points made today, you know, what the current width is. We do have an acceptable rural street section for city streets. Those are the criteria that the developer has used to design the roads within the plat that's before us tonight. We'd want to measure and assess the current condition of 33rd. How wide is it? Does it meet our current rural street section design standards? If it does, we'd probably be satisfied leaving it as is for some time. You know, but if safety became a concern, and whether there was some accident data that drove the need for reconstructing it, whether it was, there's all kinds of reasons that assessment could come forward, whether it's the residents in the area bringing that request of an assessment forward. Development to the east could trigger the need for the reconstruction of that roadway. Those are a few ideas that come to mind, but yeah, there's a number of reasons that assessment could be brought forward.
I don't know, I guess in that, and again, I'm not saying it should be Steve's necessarily, because like you said, we kind of missed the boat, or maybe like you said, maybe there was something out there from long ago, but I just, it is a concern of mine. It's to me, it's too narrow, but as a collector with that many homes, so it just might be some homework, so.
And its functionality is actually a local residential street section.
But you could see right there that you know, the streets in the development are wider than that street bringing them in.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, it doesn't, you know, I can point that out right there. So, you know, the streets in the development are great. It's getting them there, that.
Yeah, and that is like the tough thing, because right now this is the sole access. With the major street plan though, eventually 33rd will be built to a minor collector street section, and that is, you know, the growing pains, I guess. And right now they have 2 access points. Our rural street section, I think this probably would be close to meeting that, but that is something that Heath and the engineering staff review, and we'll continue to keep a pulse on that.
Mr. Horning's in the audience today. I'm just curious, maybe to shed a little bit of light on this discussion, whether there was any obligations on your part for your prior phases of the subdivision related to improving 33rd Avenue or 33rd Street. With the earlier phases, was there anything or connectivity to those phases of development in improving 33rd?
Yeah, so when we did the addendum to CAC's, whatever edition it was, the first phase that abutted 33rd, we put on there at the time that 33rd was improved, that it would be the successors, and that's what we wanted to avoid in this situation with 42nd, and collected up front, that they would be assessed, because like Heath said, it would be an assessment project. So it's acknowledging that in the agreement that they would be responsible for that.
Steve, are you looking at building 17th and 18th all in one swoop, or are you building it from east to west, west to east? What's your plans as far as the development moving forward?
Thank you. I'm Steve Horning, owner of CAX. The reason I plan on doing the full thing now is that the municipalities are charging 20% of the water each year. So if I wait, it cost me about $48,000. If I would have done this last year, it cost me $48,000. This year it's going to cost me $96,000. And if I wait, I owe another $48,000 per year until it gets up to full throttle. So that is the reason why
Do the whole thing.
did the whole thing at once. And the fire department required 17th to go all the way to 42nd. So the fire department was part of the reason that we felt it had to be done all at one time.
Okay, yeah, I figured that's what was going on, but.
You know. And on 42nd Street, I would be paying up front with $153,000. I'd be paying $153,000 up front for the future development of that street, whereas in the past on 33rd, nothing was paid up front. I don't believe by anybody, you know.
Have you talked with John West and the guys out in Ponset Town or Pelican Township about 42nd, and you've told them that we're not going to have trucks running up and down it, and you've had those conversations with that group?
I've had several conversations with them. All three of the township personnel, and originally I was hauling dirt from Stony Point and coming in on 42nd and dumping it in the property. They objected, so we stopped it right there. And it's not practical for me to come in from the west anyway. All my gravel is going to come from the east, so they're not going to come around and go on 42nd and come in backwards. They're going to come in the short way. So cement trucks, all the cement's from the east. There's no reason for anyone to be on 42nd. I'll tear that road up myself personally more than any of them trucks would by bringing my farm equipment down there and taking my farm equipment to the farm, the property in the west.
As far as the build out of the lots themselves after the infrastructure is put in, that's expected to continue from east to west fashion as well?
Well, and Steve can speak to that, but we have that in the agreement too, where when a building permit is issued, that the developer or the contractor, the owner would be made aware of to not have their contractor using that street, and then therefore you do have the permit that could be held liable, you know, if somebody is refusing to not use 42nd, or if you know what I'm trying to say. I think that was
The building permit would be tied to not using 42nd Street. At least you could stipulate that on there, so that if they know that, then you could always ratchet that down.
Yep.
And that's in the development agreement too, I believe, or in our covenants. One is either in the covenants or the development agreement.
In the construction access agreement.
Right. Okay.
And that was sent to John West with the township, and he was comfortable with it. And yeah, we, like I said, had multiple meetings with township, you know, and invited Luke, and then the city and the developers, so that we could get something arranged that seemed acceptable to all parties.
Okay. Have any additional questions?
This is Ford.
Yes, Ms. Ford?
Back to the park, recreation trail, that kind of thing. The agreement, I believe you said, indicated that the trail area would be graded to certain specifications until the recreational trail was actually put in by the city. But between that time, between the initial grading and when the city actually puts in the trail, who is responsible for maintaining that grading? Is that just in any part of the agreement?
The homeowner or the successor of the lot, because so basically they'll seed it into grass. So they will have a like a berm area in a way, and then the drainage swale, the ditch, and then the street. And so that's for their benefit.
Until someone actually buys the lot and builds on it, that part of the proposed bike trail area will not have anybody maintaining it?
The developer would still have to maintain it. Whoever is
until throughout that in-between period.
Yeah, if they are the owner, then whoever is the owner of the lot, if it is sold, the successors, they would be responsible for the maintenance within that easement area. It would be the same as, boulevard areas. Because
all right, thank you.
Yep.
And Brandy, would that grading requirement be noted on the individual platted lots in any way?
So it will be a part of the development agreement, and it is shown on the construction plans. And before this development would be accepted by city council, city engineer would review, what improvements have been completed, making sure that that was one of the items. If it hadn't been, we wouldn't accept any of the infrastructure, and that would be done before acceptance.
I'm more thinking for the individual sale of lots to homeowners and whether or not there's a clear requirement that grading be maintained if the trail has not yet been installed.
Right, and it is in an easement. So, if they were to come in for a building permit, that would be something that we would see on their grading plan, that they weren't looking to take out that bike trail area and instruct them whatever they were planning on doing, and making them aware of the future bike trail installation.
And Mr. Chairman?
Thank you. Yes.
Maybe just to provide a little bit more context of how I would visualize this. We did something similar on the most recent phase of the CAC subdivision where a bike trail grading requirement was part of that plat. And how I'd visualize this is the developer, while he's performing his overlot grading to build the roads, they would set this elevation at the appropriate grade in conjunction with the overlot grading and the roadway grading. And it would essentially be set, in theory, at that time and in place at the point of sale of those lots, at the point of transaction of a home builder or a lot buyer coming into play. And then with it being memorialized and protected within that easement, we then would look at the building permits and make sure they aren't showing any proposed regrading of that area that would adversely affect the pathway grading. And then it would, again, presumably, if all that falls into place, it would be preserved there for us to come in and throw some base down and put some paving down to have a bike path at some point in the future when the city deems appropriate.
So the bike path is going to be its own little trail? Why can't it be like 19th Street where it's just wider off the street?
I don't know if that was discussed earlier on, Brandy, about having a shared pathway, roadway, or not.
I mean, wouldn't that be easier for the developer even just to widen that enough for that, that 4 feet of whatever we require?
It was the safety component, and to have the separation of not having them, for the time being, there will be a 4-foot shoulder that when there isn't pavement, in any rural setting where if you are walking that you would be able to utilize that. The urban density lots will have sidewalk, and the lots that are not adjacent to the recreational trail along 17th, they will also have sidewalk. to have that pedestrian connectivity throughout. But the idea that discussed with the park board was just the safety and recreational component of it.
It is kind of a berm thing then.
Yeah, and if I, slight, it's just really, and it'll grade up with the lot, but just so then you're not having, it's raised above where the drainage will happen, so then you're not getting a flooded bike path.
What I can see is where the bike path is, where our garage is on South Lake Drive, and it jumps over and goes across. There's 2 foot of grass between the road and the bike path. Mm-hmm. So there's a difference. It's a safety factor, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've got that in a number of areas with the bike trail already.
The one I see is that.
Mm-hmm.
Then this one will be similar to that, only separated even further by the drainage ditch, the drainage swale that's there from the Rural Street section, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. I guess I was envisioning it right along the road, and then you wouldn't have that extra work, but I guess safety would make sense.
Well, I just want to reiterate, I think this is a wonderful development. I know Steve's been working on it for many, many years, and I think it's something that will be a benefit to the Watertown. It'll give some different options for people that want to live maybe in a more rural setting on larger lots that we don't have in the area. And we can, I think some of the things that we talked about, I think are all big picture things that maybe don't affect this development specifically, but it's things that we need to be looking at down the road. And Mr. Chair, if we can move on, I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval.
I'll second.
Yeah. Mr. Case, thank you. Got a motion and a second. We'll go ahead and take a vote on this resolution.
All right. Dolly?
Yes?
Ford?
Yes.
Kays?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Oletzky?
Yes.
Dargits Johnson?
Yes.
Culhane?
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no. That resolution is approved. Appreciate the discussion on that item. As Mr. Case said, a lot of this is kind of procedural stuff and long-term planning that we probably need to address and flesh out a little bit more. It's good discussion though from the board. Moving on to item 6E, resolution number 2022-12 as a Harmony Hill plat.
Okay, thank you, Blake. So Harmony Hill, as you guys are aware of, is also another large development going on within the city right now. And so you can see, and so this concept plan, let me pull up the agenda packet. Okay. So the owner and developer here is the Benedictine Sisters of Watertown, the Mother of God Monastery, and they have submitted the Plat of Harmony Hills Second Edition, which will encompass the area shown here on the overview of the plat, and which for just to have a grasp on where this is located. Harmony Hill, the development, that the concept plan was approved on October 7th of 2021, and it has since, that was when this was amended. I need to get a different overview. Challenger Way has been reconfigured. If you recall with that, we did the update. That came forward on October 7th along with the rezone for just because when it was initially zoned, the lot lines changed with that reconfiguration of Challenger Way, so then the rezone also happened. So with this plat, the rezone has also been submitted to City Council. There was that lapse in time just where the development landed in October and that they were going to wait for a spring project, so that's why the plat was on hold. And then finalizing the rezone with council as well. So that, you can see here though, it will be about 84 acres will be platted, and this will have a combination of the PUD planned unit development, C3 highway commercial, and R3 multifamily residential, as well as agricultural for the outlot area. So it's encompassing phase 1 of the concept plan. And so the annexation, let's see here, the concept plan was approved on October 7th, as well as the rezone October 7th, and then the area was annexed and zoned. The areas that weren't already annexed and zoned were approved on July 6th. So this plat does conform to all of the approved concept plan and rezone. And so the PUD area, the planned unit development, encompasses its lots 1 and 2, or lot 1A and 1B. Those are the PUD, which is where the monastery and their project of the village area will be taking place in there. And then we have, there's one highway commercial lot, and I'll just go to this overview here. The highway commercial lot will be located here, and then this area is R3 multifamily residential, as well as this lot. And then if you recall, the park board approved on May 25th to allow Challenger Park, which is this area, to remain in private ownership, but then it will be open to the public for the recreational aspect there, but then the sisters will maintain it and also develop it. And they've expressed their plans for that, which I think will be great. The rest of the area, the infrastructure improvements are included on the attached development agreement. They're, let's see here, with that development agreement, pretty standard. This will be, this area here that I'm pointing out will be the regional detention pond for the area, which the city will enter a BMP maintenance agreement for, with there being the mixed uses. And so then they will be responsible for its continued maintenance. The BMP maintenance agreement just allows for the city to perform maintenance if it's not being done and it's causing issue that's impacting private properties. So I guess private or public ways. 28th, and this is another situation where 28th has been platted as a private road previously. They will be dedicating it as public right-of-way. In the development agreement, we have the language that in the future, when it is improved, or when or if, that with the sisters retaining ownership of Challenger Park, they will be required to pay for the half street cost of the assessment. But that would also require this properties to the south to annex and zone, and then it would be an assessment project where they would extend the utilities as well. And so with that situation, the street itself, the street superintendent, Rob Bainan, went and looked at the condition of it, and it is in good condition, and it meets the rural street section requirement for city engineering design standards. So we put language in the development agreement that if there is maintenance work that needs to be done prior to the acceptance of the rest of the infrastructure improvements that are spelled out in the development agreement, they would need to do that, which would require, a crack seal, chip seal with fog, all of those things. So that would be something that could be evaluated after the 2 years and the development agreement have expired, and they're looking to put it up for acceptance.
Is the Landsberger addition in the city limits or out of city limits presently?
Ouch.
So if at some point in time you guys had to do the 28th Avenue, the city would end up just eating that cost if and when Landsberger would ever come in, that they would pay the assessment?
No, I think that would be a part of, same kind of with Kittleson Edition, where if they wanted to come in, they would need to bring that
So
street.
we're only gonna build a half street in the event that happens? Or are we building we're gonna build a whole section of street on 28th if it needs to be brought in and up to code at some point in time? But the responsibility of paying for that's gonna be the city and the sisters until Landsberger is brought in?
I would imagine that it would be at the time that Landsberger was brought in, if it
So
were approved.
we don't plan on building it until Landsberger brings it in.
I don't.
So you're gonna make Landsberger people,
overspeak.
the people in that subdivision come into the city of Watertown, is that what you're saying?
No.
No, what I'm saying is at some point in time, 28th Avenue will need to be built to whatever standard it is that you need to be built, or if it needs to be upgraded. That may happen prior to Landsberger Addition ever wanting to annex into the city. If Landsberger doesn't want to annex into the city and that road needs to be built, we're saying that the nuns would be paying for half of it and the city would pay for the other half and do the assessment project?
Correct.
Okay, that's my question.
But now we're gonna spell that out, so we have it, right?
Yes.
Because otherwise, we're gonna be looking at what we just got done talking about.
That would
And
be that's our standard practice,
It is.
isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and we have the authority to do that, whether it's spelled out in a development agreement or not. I agree with Commissioner Dargis Johnson that makes sense to spell it out so that everybody's in the know. But that would be the standard practice and what we have legal authority to do, regardless of the circumstance of any agreement. So, but that's likely how I would see it progress too. Is we would likely front the cost for that south half of the street and file that assessment, and it would sit there dormant until that property were annexed, and then at that point in time, according to legal advice we've gotten in the past, that's the point in time when it would formally get filed against those properties.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to confirm that's what our policy was on those types of situations, because I remember just seeing a thing on Kelloland a while ago where they were running into that same issue.
yes, thank you, Heath.
Another good project.
Are they gonna start this spring?
I believe so. You know, they do have a building permit for the addition to the monastery already, so there should be construction activities happening out there. So, yeah.
It's not a public hearing, it's just a discussion.
Sorry, I'm talking on mute here. But as you said, everything that we're looking at here today and the plat is consistent with what we've already looked at and approved previously.
Yep.
Chair, I would move to approve resolution number 2022-12.
Motion to approve as presented by Colhane,
I'll second that.
second by Oletsky. Any additional discussion or comments from the board? All right, we'll take a roll call vote.
All right, Colhane,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Aletsky,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Kays.
Yep.
Ford,
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes. 7 yes, 0 no. That resolution passes. We'll move on to item 7 on the agenda, is open public comment. Was there anybody here to speak on an item that wasn't on the agenda?
Nope.
With none, we'll move on to item 8, which is new business. Any new business?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to make a quick announcement. I believe everybody's aware, but Stacy Bungard, our Community Development Manager's last day was last Friday with the city. She's moved on to another opportunity down in the state of Oklahoma. So we've wished her well on that endeavor. And with that, I've been working closely with the city manager, and we will be putting a plan in place on how to backfill that position and then move forward accordingly. And just wanted to bring the board update on that.
Yeah, appreciate that. Any other new business?
None that I have.
Any old business?
Do we need to welcome Heath back?
Should, yeah.
Is this your first meeting back?
It
for
is.
Plan
Thank you
Commission?
very much for that. Appreciate it.
Oh.
Great
Yeah.
to be back.
I was excited to see you coming back.
You would have appreciated last meeting's agenda much more. I mean, put the heavy one on him. Yes, good to have Heath back, so.
Item 10 on the agenda is executive session pursuant. Do we have any reason for executive session?
Nope.
All right, and the last item is adjournment. I'll adjourn us. Appreciate the time tonight. Thank you,
All right.
everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night.